Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm going to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance meeting in like an hour or so. So just came over to the park to take a walk for a little while, kill some time, and then I'm gonna head over there. So, I already did an episode kind of covering the midterm elections and how everything went down. And since the midterms, there's been an interesting development that I've been noticing, and that is this Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump feud. And it was already starting to form before the election, actually a couple months ago, or maybe even longer than that, maybe several months ago. Donald Trump was taking slight jabs at DeSantis, but it's really ramped up now. And the reasoning behind that is because Ron DeSantis had a decisive victory in Florida. He won by a lot. He got like 60% of the vote, where even though technically most of Trump's endorsements won their elections, they were almost entirely incumbents. And a lot of the new people who came onto the scene whom he endorsed did not win. So, like Don Baldick, for example, got stomped. Carolyn Levitt got stomped. Tudor Dixon got stomped. Looks like Blake Masters is going to lose. Carrie Lake might hold on, but if she makes it, she's just going to barely get by on the skin of her teeth. Oz obviously lost to Fetterman. So it was, a lot of Trump people are trying to spin it in a positive light, but it just wasn't a very good night for Trump, because his obvious political rival did very well, and all the people that, not all the people, but several of the people he endorsed didn't make it. And some of them were supposed to make it. Like Carolyn Levitt was supposed to win. She lost by a good amount. Don Baldick was supposed to have a pretty good shot. Got absolutely stomped. So anyway, there's this new divide in the Republican Party, and you're seeing a lot of the neocons come out of the woodwork and getting behind DeSantis over the last few days on Twitter. Like everyone from the Daily Wire, Jeb Bush even, tons of people saying like we gotta ditch Trump, gotta kick him to the curb, he's just a liability. We need someone who can hold themselves together. So I do buy that some of the reasoning there is based on Trump's antics. I think a lot of people kind of think Donald Trump is like playing hot potato with a hand grenade. But also, I think a lot of people like Ron DeSantis because he legitimately believes in the empire. So with Donald Trump, it was very obvious that he himself wasn't actually a Zionist, right? Or actually a Saudi sympathizer or any of those things. It was just that he was convinced that that's what he had to do. So you could tell that Trump doesn't really give a shit if Jerusalem's the capital of Israel or not, right? But he had all these people who he put around himself that convinced him that that type of stuff was important. Or the same with Syria. He actually didn't necessarily want to bomb Syria. He didn't necessarily want to put more troops into Afghanistan when they convinced him to do that. All this stuff, if anything, his incentives were actually pushing in the other direction, because we saw it happen a couple times. And when it did happen, he'd get crazy pushback, and then he'd usually capitulate and say, okay, whatever. But his incentives were the opposite of what the neoconservatives wanted. And I was very hard on Trump because, he was president, and I think politicians deserve scrutiny. But I will admit that it's obvious that he was just a limp noodle. He was just an empty suit, someone who could be manipulated. It wasn't that he definitely just wanted to get into a war with Iran It was obvious that Mike Pompeo talked him into that, airstriking Soleimani. It was pretty obvious to me that that's not what Trump actually wants. I think there's a bit of him that's like, ooh, tough guy, bravado, like, let's go get him. Like, that definitely is an overtone he has. But I don't think he legitimately gives a fuck about the U.S. empire. I just don't see that in him. Where DeSantis, I absolutely see that. And you can look at his voting record in Congress. It's not just that he tepidly endorses everything about the neoconservative right. He was a stalwart, frontline introducer of bills that, pushed that agenda forward. Anti-terrorism bills, pro-Israel bills, like he wrote these and introduced them. It's not just that his voting mostly fell in line with the establishment. He was proactively neoconservative. And I've written an article about this. You can go to my Substack and look at, it's called DeSantis, the Right's Obama. And I think that DeSantis is basically a huge bait and switch for the anti-establishment right. Because yes, once it was politically calculated, he decided to be in stalwart opposition to the COVID vaccines and lockdowns and stuff like that. That's undeniable. He definitely took a more unpopular position than, what was the general consensus of the country, but he didn't do it when it was political suicide. He initially locked down along with everyone else, and then actually slightly after Kemp in Georgia, he started reopening things. But it wasn't until like a full year later that he became an icon of, being against the Biden administration. While Trump was in there, he didn't do that much against him. If anyone deserves that credit, it's actually Kristi Noem. She was the one who never locked anything down at all. But ever since he took that kind of appearance of opposing the establishment on COVID, it's been very obvious to me that they've been prepping this guy for a presidential run. So I was saying this toward the end of last summer. There's actually an episode I did with Pete Quinones where I know we talked about it. I should probably go clip that little section. And I was saying this guy's going to be running for president. And then I said the same thing to Clint last summer in an episode we did, because we were talking about why I don't like DeSantis. And that seems to be happening. I mean, I guess technically he still might not do it. He could always bow out, but it seems like he's being pushed by the neoconservatives. So I wanted to talk about this obvious anti-China sentiment that it's not really forming on the right. It's been a thing for a while, but it's really bubbling over. And a lot of the supposedly anti-war candidates who ran, a lot of them lost, but who ran for Congress or Senate this year, they were just god-awful China hawks. So Blake Masters was one, Joe Kent was another, and then some who got reelected or who have been in there, who have actually been okay on the war in Ukraine, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, people like that, just awful on China. And we've been kind of experimenting from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's Twitter account. You can go look. And we've been posting basically anti-China stuff. So we've been debunking the Uyghur genocide claims. And we've also been talking about how the peace agreement that Nixon made that has gotten our economies to work together has actually been one of the greatest achievements in history. You have two nuclear superpowers who are opposed, who have basically been working together and had relative peace for several decades. And why are people so terrified of China when your own government is taking your rights away every day, right? Like, I mean, the CCP is thousands of miles away across the ocean. They pose absolutely no threat to you, but you're more worried about them than you are about the FBI. And in fact, you're listening to a lot of the same institutions that you were just claiming you wanted to abolish recently because of how they treated Donald Trump, and how they're treating parents who are questioning what's being taught in their children's schools, things like that. It's these same institutions that are telling you China is the biggest enemy of the United States and that we need to do something about it. And here's the other thing. You're not often going to run into someone who thinks we should actually attack China or attempt regime change there or something. You will occasionally, but it's pretty rare. For the most part, it's like, China is our enemy and we just need to be aware of who they are. So they put all this propaganda out there about, this genocide talk and the fact that they're going to try to take over the world or whatever. And then say that we should sanction them and we should, put extremely aggressive tariffs on them and we should counter them in the Pacific Ocean. So this is how we got to where we are with Russia and Ukraine. There were very few people, aside from a couple, who would actually advocate for an all-out war with Russia. If you had said, a year ago, even like, I think we should go into war with Russia, people would have thought you were fucking nuts. But, through sanctions and through overthrowing governments near to their borders and pumping billions and billions of dollars, it's still billions of dollars, just not as many billions of dollars, but I'll just say millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars into Ukraine and screwing with Belarus and all this stuff, and this constant fear-mongering in the media about Russia, it finally pushed us to a point of being on the brink of a nuclear war with Russia. And so that's the same thing that's going to happen with China. Right now, there's a bill that's going through Congress to give Taiwan $10 billion in military aid over the next 4 years. And, we're sailing warships through the Strait of Taiwan, right off the coast of China. Can you imagine if they were doing that to us, if they were sailing warships through the Gulf of Mexico or something? I mean, we wouldn't have that. We're upset that they're, doing exercises in the South China Sea, thousands of miles away from us. So this sentiment is building the same way it built around Russia. And just from our experiment on Twitter, there are tons and tons of right-wingers and even left-wingers who are coming out to condemn us as CCP sympathizers or China paid operatives or whatever. And it shows how easy it will be to hook the right into war with China. It'll be just like these dumbass left-wingers with Russia. A lot of these lefties, like, they probably, if you ask them, should we go into nuclear war with Russia, most of them would say no. But if you ask them specifics about, like, should we lay off Russia? Should we try to have peace talks? Should we realize that, this is not our fight or whatever? They're all like, no, 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 no. We got to stay in on this. Slava Ukraine or whatever. It's going to be the exact same thing with China and the right-wingers. And then, just like some of the right-wingers are still supportive of this shit in Ukraine, you're going to have some left-wingers who are going to be supportive of escalation of tensions with China. So we're fucked. We're in a bad spot. And I really see the DeSantis simping as kind of symbolic of that direction becoming even heavier. Because, yeah, Trump was really bad on all this stuff, but I think it was obvious that he was convinced or tricked into doing these things. I don't think that he actually personally cares that much about a lot of this stuff. In fact, I think his incentives are to go and talk with people. That was obvious. That's what he did with Putin. That's what he did with Kim Jong-un. I think his general direction is to try to negotiate. I don't think that's going to be what DeSantis wants to do. That's obviously not what Biden wants to do. So that to me is the biggest thing we've lost with Trump. A lot of people suck his dick too much and act like he didn't drop more bombs than Obama did, which he did. He killed more civilians, at least per capita. I don't know if the actual number was higher, but he killed a much higher percentage of civilians with the bombs he dropped than Obama did. So definitely like no love lost over Trump and his policies, but he was willing to negotiate. He was willing to sit down and talk. That is something we no longer have with Biden, and I don't have any reason to think that we'll have that with DeSantis either. So I don't know. I think this is something important to notice and take heed of. And I think we should be doing everything we can to publicly message to right-wingers that, you know, this stuff going on with China is no different than what's going on with Ukraine and Russia right now. Like, if anything, it's more insane. So, yeah, I don't know. If anyone's got any questions, I know I saw some comments drop in here. Oh, just people saying hi. Hey, guys, thanks for watching. I'm gonna head over to that meeting here soon, and I'm finally getting involved locally, you know, beyond just helping run a Senate campaign. I'm gonna be trying to help push local issues like defend the guard and you know, other New Hampshire related issues along, trying to actually become part of the local machine. We had a meeting today, and I'm not going to talk about everything we said because it was not a public meeting, but it was basically about what should we do as libertarians here in New Hampshire. I tend to think that if you want to win, you got to run as a Republican. I mean, I'm all about the Libertarian Party messaging and it being a thing and everything, but I think if you actually want to run in an election and become an elected official, you should just do it as a Republican. And on the local level, running for state representative or whatever, you're not going to have to cuck to AIPAC or something or sign a weapons deal with the Saudis in order to get somewhere. I mean, we're talking about you know, local elections. You can be a Rothbardian as a Republican and win. Let's see, we got some people commenting in here. How do you change people's minds? A lot of right-wingers probably hold grudges over manufacturing going overseas. How do you bring manufacturing back? Yeah, so this, I think, is a good point. And I think we should be competitive with China. That's the problem, is we're not competitive anymore, right? Because we're so over-regulated, and we've also destroyed our monetary system. So, you know, our trade deficits with China and everything, they're ridiculous. I mean, we have had billion-dollar trade deficits every year with surrounding countries who don't export anything anymore. We don't make anything here anymore. So the solution to that is not getting into an economic war. So I don't think we should put sanctions on China. I don't think we should put tariffs on Chinese goods. I think we should be deregulating our economy back here so that people will be interested in starting businesses here. I mean, there's a reason everyone goes to Mexico, and it's not just China. They go to Mexico, they go to India, they go to Taiwan, they go wherever, because you know, there's just less regulation and it's impossible to start anything here. And inflation is so rampant here, and now that's a problem in a lot of these countries, but especially here right now. I mean, we've screwed ourselves. So we should, you know, we should try to put our economy back on track and try to deregulate to a point where we can be competitive again. So I would like to have a strong, I mean, we do have a stronger economy than China, by the way, we still do, but they're just a lot smarter with, you know, our trade balance than we are. They produce a lot more than we do. So, you know, that's an us problem that I'd like to see us fix. You know, like this whole deal with microchips and everything, with semiconductors with Taiwan, the obvious solution there is to start producing our own here so that we don't have to worry about that. So I would like to see us try to have a more productive economy back here at home, so we don't have to be reliant on China. But I don't think that cutting off trade with China or trying to sanction them or especially get into a war with them is the right solution. I mean, that's just crazy. I would like to see America get to the point where we're producing enough stuff that we're not beholden to them at all, but we would still have open trade with them, if that makes sense. So there's a difference between being held hostage by your own economic rules that you have passed and cutting off from trade. Like, I don't think that's the solution. I mean, I think you know, it's kind of, I'm gonna try to put this into a different light. Like, if you're a poor person, you are going to be limited to your choices, right? Like, you're not going to be able to have as good of a mechanic. You're not going to be able to buy as nice of a house, and you're not going to be able to you know, go to as expensive a barber, whatever. Like, all your options are going to be limited because you've limited yourself. If you become more wealthy, you don't suddenly start cutting off all business with anyone who's below a certain bar necessarily. They're still going to get some of your, you know, they'll still get some of your business to an extent, but you're not going to be held hostage to them anymore. So if there's a great bakery that you like to go to, even if you're poor and you can afford it, maybe you go there. When you become rich, you don't necessarily stop going there. You don't like cut off all trade with, you know, lesser people, but you have more options now. So now you don't have to be beholden to that mechanic. You know, if that mechanic didn't necessarily get things done on time for you, maybe you're not going to use that mechanic anymore because you're going to have more options because you're wealthier. So I would basically like to see that happen in the United States. And I don't think, you know, the solution isn't going in and sabotaging your mechanic or something. Like, the problem is yours. Like, you've created your own situation, and if you could get yourself out of it, then you won't have to use that shitty mechanic anymore. So if the United States started creating better products, we wouldn't be beholden to Chinese manufacturing anymore. But that doesn't mean you have to cut them off. It doesn't mean you have to sanction them. It'll be through competition and capitalism instead of through force and coercion. So I think that is the way to go, if that makes sense. Rise to Liberty podcast says, keep goods moving across borders to prevent soldiers from moving across borders. Yep, that's a Bastiat quote. And I think it's true. I mean, think of all the relative peace that exists between major nations because of trade. And this is one of the reasons the Nord Stream 2 pipeline getting bombed is bad, because that was a reason for peace between Germany and Russia that doesn't exist anymore. Because there's, you know, if someone's supplying you with something, you don't have a reason to want to knock them off anymore, right? Like, they're giving you, you don't want to kill the guy who brings your oil every couple weeks to, you know, for heating, or you don't want to kill the mailman or like whoever, because they're bringing you something. Like, there's a reason, you know, even if you hate that dude, even if you like, you know, even if you absolutely despise somebody, or, you know, completely fundamentally disagree with their religion or whatever it is, if they are supplying you with a service or a good, then that kind of, you know, that kind of kills whatever strife you'd have between the two of you guys. Like, so, you know, the beauty of America with our capitalist system is, you know, a Christian and an atheist. If a Christian wants a, you know, a ride in a taxi and the driver is an atheist, it doesn't matter, because you're paying money for your ride. So that neutralizes any extreme disagreement you might have. The Christian believes the atheist is going to burn in hell for eternity, but it's kind of, it just doesn't matter because trade on a personal level trumps whatever ideological differences you have. So free trade does the same thing between nations. It, you know, it kind of quells outbursts of aggression or war, because there's a reason for the two parties to get along and to, you know, have trade. Like Ron Paul once said, if the U.S. set the corporate tax rate at 0, you'd likely see a lot more companies setting up shop, staying in the U.S. Yep, exactly. So instead of punishing another country for its success, we should be learning from them and trying to do more of that here. And there's a lot of bad lessons to learn from China too. China's in a tough spot economically in a lot of ways. So they're not beating us at every level. It's just the trade level they are beating us at. And instead of like trying to sabotage them for, we should be trying to do better ourselves. Like I said, it's not just China, it's Mexico. You know, a bunch of different countries have cheaper labor than we do. And, you know, we used to have the strongest economy in the world. We'd have cheap goods and high wages. And we've destroyed that by destroying our money and destroying our own economy. It's not the Chinese fault. You know, I actually noticed today a lot of people were pointing out that when Nixon met with the Chinese, that ever since then our economy has been on a consistent downward slope. However, they're missing, Nixon did something else too. He didn't just meet with the Chinese and establish a deal. What else did he do? He took the dollar off the gold standard in 1971. And there had already been problems before that. 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve. You know, we already suspended the gold standard a couple times during war to try to pay for things that we couldn't afford. But that really sealed the deal. That completely screwed us. And ever since then, it's been a steady downward slope. So again, that was a self-inflicted problem. That wasn't China. That was our own problem. So we should start trying to fix our own internal problems instead of getting super aggressive with another nuclear superpower like we've been with Russia. So I'm gonna head over to that meeting. Thanks for watching, guys. But just pay attention to now that I pointed that out, go on Twitter or go on the news and try to see if you recognize the number of neoconservatives and establishment figures lining up behind DeSantis now. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, no love lost over Trump leaving office, but he did have a mind for negotiation, and I don't think he actually personally believed much of this stuff about being a neoconservative. I think he was kind of talked into it, where I think Ron is through and through, you know, an establishment neocon. And you don't even have to have, you know, Sheldon Adelson and, you know, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and all these guys. He doesn't even need them to suck. He already does on his own. So I think we should just be wary of that. Let's see, one last comment here. I'd also point out that the housing bubble is even worse in China than it is here. Once that baby pops, and it absolutely will, your average person in China is going broke. Yeah, that's true. It's actually kind of mind-boggling. In China, they have these things called ghost cities. They just got entire cities that they've built with nobody living in them, and they also have a homelessness problem. It's kind of amazing. So even though they are beating us at trade, they're not the economic superpower everyone wants them. Everyone wants us to believe they are. So go check out my episode I did with Pat McFarlane 7 months ago, I think. It's called America's #1 enemy, I think, and it's all about China. We delve into a lot of this stuff, but don't fall for the bullshit propaganda. As usual, it's bullshit. And everyone's going to call you a CCP sympathizer, China stooge, whatever. Who cares? They say the same thing if you oppose. It's just like Jeremy Kaufman's War is Retarded ad, you know? They call you anti-American, terrorist sympathizer, weak, soft, but what you really are is brave. That's just the truth. So I'll catch you guys later.